it's never been a better time to build in crypto. And, to Luca's point, you can really feel that we're in this inflection point at the moment.
The great entrepreneurs will get greater. More people in the middle are going to be looking for a way to kind of find opportunity. There's no better opportunity than navigating the on-chain rails, that is crypto rails. And I also think that the top entrepreneurs from other industries are really starting to come in here and starting to compete, which I think is going to raise the bar for everyone.
Hey everyone, if you're watching this rather than listening, apologies that I could not be on video for this episode. Regardless, this was a fun conversation with Luca Netz and Brandon Millman about how crypto goes mainstream and which players are well positioned to bring the masses on-chain. Some of the more interesting questions we raised were around the future of Coinbase, which is trying for the first time to be a more product-focused company. Luca feels like it should focus on its core strength, which is around business deals. Meanwhile, Brandon feels that an everything app is just an impossible task. Both Brandon and Luca see Stripe and Robinhood as strong players to contend with, and Luca also surprised me when he said that he felt like World Liberty Financial could be a dark horse. Finally, we also talk about how one of the big opportunities is to replicate the business models of successful fintechs, but to do so in a borderless way on blockchain rails. In fact, Luca is a super fan of Phantom, and he seems to think that Phantom could exploit this opportunity. And perhaps Phantom could even leverage the Solana Seeker or another phone to do so. Plus, we cover why it is that incumbents are likely to fumble the ball, and at least in the case of PayPal, seem to have already lost their opportunity. As always, I hope you enjoy the show. Earning yield on stablecoins just got smarter with RE Protocol. Get up to 16% APR plus points through regulated insurance backing and ETH basis strategies with no lockups required. Deposit USDC, USDT, or DAI to start earning stable yield and points today at re.xyz, re.xyz. Mantle is pioneering blockchain for banking, a revolutionary new category at the intersection of TradFi and Web3. Follow Mantle_official to learn more. Welcome, Brandon and Luca.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we are at a very interesting stage in crypto's development. It feels like we're at this moment where everything feels like it's about adoption. There's all these major fintech players and banks, even multinationals that are either making moves into crypto or at least exploring getting into crypto. And we also have crypto companies that are either teaming up with such players or encroaching on kind of like the more typical TradFi-ish areas like payments. So I want to talk about, all of these different players, but first let's just kind of zoom out and look at, how would you characterize this particular phase in crypto's journey? How do you view kind of like the entrepreneur's task now versus previous cycles or previous eras in crypto? And maybe Brandon, we can start with you.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, first of all, yeah, thanks, Laura, for having me on again. And really, really appreciate opportunity to chat a little bit about Phantom, what's going on. And yeah, obviously a really super exciting time to be building a crypto company as an entrepreneur and founder of a company. And yeah, for many different reasons, obviously, like you stated, it feels like adoption is really been surging lately. You see every day there's a new headline about some fintech company, some more traditional finance institution like banks, etc., getting into crypto in one way or another. And yeah, I think this moment has actually just been a culmination of a lot of things that we've been working on as an industry for the last couple of eras or last couple of cycles. Like you mentioned, I think in the last couple of years, it's really been a lot about building out the infrastructure. And from a lot of different perspectives, I think there's sort of the raw blockchain tech, the blockchain infrastructure, and things like speed, cost, efficiency, getting better and better. There's things like developer tools alongside that. And then there's things like regulatory infrastructure and things of that nature. I think a lot of folks in the industry have been working at these things from a lot of different angles, infrastructure in terms of improving and getting the infrastructure up to speed. So I'd say in terms of sort of the entrepreneur's task, it's been, I think, very infrastructure oriented for the last number of cycles and number of years. And then, it's all culminating and coming to a head now. And as we all know, there's a lot of network effects and compounding, value involved with building this type of open permissionless ecosystem. And so I think you're starting to see sort of the runaway train effect a bit now. But yeah, that's sort of how I would generally characterize sort of where we've been and where we're at now. But yeah, Luca, I'm not sure if you have a different take.
No, I think it's a good take. I think I would probably, how I view it is, I think this is like the great inflection point. I think the great paradigm shift here. I think one of the things we underwrote when we were assessing buying Pudgy penguins. I remember talking to my co-founders at the time. I told them, I was like, there's no industry in crypto where the bar of entrepreneurship is so low and the ability to create a billion-dollar company is so high based on that low bar. I think that was really predicated on storytelling and the future potential of what could be. I think the paradigm shift that you're going to see here, at least for entrepreneurship, is I think player entrepreneurs are coming here, and I don't think, and I think it's going to be I think you're going to see power law kind of kick in. I think for the first time, where the best are going to continue to win, and there's going to be more competition to kind of drive and figure out who's the best. And I also think the days of speculative hope, I know he won't mind me saying this, but I had lunch with Novogratz like 6-7 weeks ago, and I agreed with him. And he was like, the days of no revenue being worth billions of dollars has to be over. And so I think it's going to get a lot harder, meaning I think the easy road of, hey, here's this net new asset class and net new technology, and anybody who builds around it is going to see some sort of value accrual. And frankly, layman entrepreneurs coming in and building billion-dollar businesses, I think, are over. And I think that's a good thing. And so I think the focus now is, how do you take this hyper financialization and these payment rails that tap into global liquidity and global composability and actually build disruptive technologies that are going to change the world, and not just build, pseudo disruptive technologies that you tell a story around and a narrative around and preach that you're changing the world without doing it. I think this is going to be the era of result-driven success and less speculative success, which I think is nothing but a good thing. And I think the floodgates are finally open. I mean, it was right in front of us the whole time. Some of us saw it, some of us didn't. If I'm being frank, I actually didn't see this missing piece in the consumer crypto funnel. But for crypto to really break through into mass the way we had all been hoping, there was a couple things that are broken, one being the consumer journey, but I also think just the adoption of stablecoins. And now that I think stablecoins are going to be a popular medium in just how everyday people transact, it's going to be really easy to funnel them into these on-chain applications in a way where I think the biggest caveat to onboarding and the consumer curve, specifically on-chain, was really that 0 to 1. Phantom actually, it's ironic you're here, Brandon, because I think you probably have one of the best 0 to 1s in crypto, definitely in the Solana ecosystem. But that, I think, is going to be the big paradigm shift here. Is you have stable coins, users now have excess, on-chain dollars to spend on applications. Crypto is the king of hyper financialization in a world with AI. Power law, I think, will also kick in. The great entrepreneurs will get greater. More people in the middle are going to be looking for a way to kind of find opportunity. There's no better opportunity than navigating the on-chain rails, that is crypto rails. And I also think that the top entrepreneurs from other industries are really starting to come in here and starting to compete, which I think is going to raise the bar for everyone.
Yeah. So before we get into, kind of the various players, I did also want to ask for you too, because both of you, I think, have managed to grow and get distribution and, kind of widen the audience for crypto. And I was curious if you could just talk a little bit about your stories in terms of how you did that, how you thought about it, and even just like now how you're thinking differently about it given the stage that we're at. So a little bit of like history.
Mhm. Yeah, I can go first real quick. Basically I got my start in sort of my tech industry career working at pretty early Twitter from 2013 to sort of 2017. So that's where personally I cut my teeth on learning how to build internet applications for at extremely large scale, tens of millions to 100 millions of users. From there, I jumped into crypto around 2017 during the ICO white paper era and joined a very early sort of pre-DeFi DeFi startup called 0x. And that's where I cut my teeth on really learning what DeFi is, helping define decentralized exchange as it's used today. And I think during that period, recognized and gained a lot of insights around what makes for a good user experience, what are the major bottlenecks in the industry, and especially had I think an especially interesting vantage point as a developer trying to push an end user application and recognizing that the wallet was really where the rubber met the road in terms of, is a user actually going to convert to use these things? Is a user actually going to onboard? Is a user actually going to click confirm in the checkout flow? And recognize that, yeah, essentially the wallet, it would be the highest leverage place that we could apply ourselves to actually push the whole industry forward. And so that's where, yeah, we kind of initially got the initial spark to build Phantom, originally conceptualized as a MetaMask competitor, and we wanted to sort of replace them as the entry point into crypto. And then fast forward a couple of years from there, and we're way larger than MetaMask. Many more users are entering the crypto ecosystem for the first time, and I think it just kind of really went to show our whole thesis around usability really being that kind of bottleneck. And if you apply some sort of standard thinking from the Web 2.0 world and a lot of our experience there, there was a lot of low hanging fruit to pick up. And yeah, moving forward, I think what Luca mentioned, sort of, I think a combination of my answer and Luca's answer from before. I think the infrastructure phase where there are sort of a lot of paintings of, the infrastructure phase where there's a lot of vapor to be peddled, I think is over, and the users and the dollars are here. And so I think it's going to come down to actually providing the best experience for the user, owning their attention, owning their mind share, earning their, owning their business for helping secure their funds and all of that. I think that's sort of the next phase for and we're going to see crypto.
And honestly, Brandon, just to chime in there, looking from a third party, I think Phantom's growth and success story, really embodies the saying around like the best product wins. I mean, from my perspective, you guys just built the best wallet. And the users galvanized around that and hit escape velocity. And when the product is just so much better than your competitor or incumbent, if, like you said, for such a crucial part of the crypto experience, you're going to win in a big way. So I'm a happy Phantom user. Kudos to you guys for building a phenomenal product.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think to maybe answer the question through my frame, the Penguin character in our lens, it's a little different than maybe a direct functional product. But the IP and the character for us is the product. And so I knew there was a problem in crypto. The problem to me was crypto is taboo and intimidating, right? And so what's not taboo and what's not intimidating? A cute penguin. And so our whole thought process is, I have a more process-oriented conversion process than maybe a direct conversion process. So I actually think the way that I'm approaching growth is I'm trying to meet consumers in an emotional gap that I'm trying to fill. And I'm trying to invade their hearts and minds. And as I create as many touch points and rapport with that consumer, slowly but surely two things happen. They either go down the rabbit hole themselves, or I push them down the rabbit hole. And so our conversion process is a little more, how many times can we reach the consumer? How can we build trust and credibility amongst them? And over time, as the sales and the wins of crypto, momentum kind of comes back, I'm the most familiar, most credible, most tangential, IP that people could resonate with. And I think our marketing and growth strategy is really predicated around touch points. I think a lot of people saw our Walmart and our Target and our toy product as a revenue driver, and sure it was. But to be frank, the revenue there doesn't excite me. What excites me is the marketing and the touch points post, when somebody turns off their computer or closes their iPhone, being able to have that sort of emotional visibility, I thought was really important for us. And so, I believe specifically in the category of culture. I want Pudgy and Igloo to own culture in crypto. I think that's really, where we, I think, have found our stride. And so looking at it through that lens, it's a multitude of, what's your message? What's your story? Pudgy Penguins is the face of crypto. It's the mascot of crypto. It's the underdog story of crypto. How do you meet people where they are? Every single place you can go to on the internet, whether it's Google, Instagram, X, there isn't a social network in which penguins aren't plagued throughout that network. And then ultimately, creating something that's universal, which I think is a byproduct of the IP that I frankly inherited or purchased, which was, I think, a big place where we want to win. And I think we're probably the only group winning in this regard, is how do you get the family involved, right? If crypto is truly going to be mass, how does every single person a part of the family stack, participate and enjoy and lean into crypto rails? And I think from our perspective, I think IP just in general has a really great role to play in this respect for the industry. And I think Pudgy specifically has really done a really great job at bringing people from all walks of life and all ranges of the psychographic and demographic together. And I think you kind of combine that all with just, in my opinion, the best illustrated penguin of all time. And I think you've seen our growth over the last couple of years, and it's byproduct of, I think, those lines of thought.
Yeah, I love that. That's so smart, thinking about like multiple generations and like how different people of different age groups or demographics connect. One other comment I wanted to make was just like earlier when you guys were talking about, bringing in new people and stuff, like I had flashes of those like FTX ads and, with like Giselle Bundchen and I was like, okay. So it's the same thing, except there's like real substance behind it, basically, is the difference. Okay. So let's talk about just all the various players that we think could kind of dominate in this next like phase of adoption. So I wrote down a few different ones, but you should feel free to add any, because I'm sure there's ones I haven't thought of, or there might be ones that I mentioned that you feel, don't really belong in this category. So I just love to start with like just an overall view on kind of like all of them. And then we're going to go into more detail around like different segments of the market, because obviously crypto isn't just one thing. There's like multiple different ways people can get in. So some of the players that I think are going to be big or have a shot at being big in this area, obviously Coinbase, because they're already big, but their audience is primarily crypto people. Robinhood, obviously. Stripe. X apparently wants to, become the everything app. They've already done like, the partnership with Polymarket, and they're just saying that that's their intention, and that competes with like the base app apparently, because that's where they're going. Stablecoins, obviously, that's like a huge part of this next phase. So, Tether, Circle, some of the newer players. I mean, it could even be like an Athena or some of these new stable chains, Stable, Plasma, etc. So, just when you look at that landscape, like, are there any particular ones that you feel like are better positioned than others? Or like, how do you think, and I know this is just a broad question. We'll get more into like various parts of the market more specifically in a moment. But just when you look at this landscape, like how are you sort of thinking all of this will play out?
And then you're getting first dibs on all these questions, brother.
Yeah, happy to. Well, first of all, just going back to Luca's comment about the Pengu sort of and Pudgy penguins entering the family stack, I will say I stole my son's Pengu doll earlier this morning, and yeah, he's getting onboarded every day by this thing. So yeah, super cute. He sent a couple of these over to the
It's a
Phantom
weird
office.
giraffe penguin mashup.
He loves it. He loves it. Okay, well, yeah. In terms of that question, I mean, it's obviously very, very broad question. I think zooming out a bit, I think it's all the whole space is very positive sum at the moment. Like, I think every new entrant that is adding more firepower to the ecosystem, helping us build more tools and easier ways for people to access crypto is a good thing for everyone. And personally, yeah, I think again, it's never been a better time to build in crypto. And to Luca's point, you can really feel that we're in this inflection point at the moment. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice the answer. Maybe just to call one player out specifically, I think Stripe is a very interesting one that I think the payments angle specifically is one that has not really been cracked yet in the U.S. and I think has been pointed at, or as payments has always been that use case that's very, very illustrative of the power of crypto. Send money anywhere in the world, low fees, instant access, etc. But I think one that has gotten a little bit less love over things like DeFi and NFTs over the years. And so, and I have a couple different theories for why that is, but I think in terms of who I'm most excited about, I think Stripe is probably one of the ones that has maybe the potential largest asymmetric upside for the space specifically. But other ones like X, I think that's also quite interesting just because they do have their own very large distribution and user base that is obviously there's a lot of overlap with crypto Twitter, but I think it's oftentimes hard to comprehend how many people are really out there that actually never have heard of crypto or touched crypto yet. And so I think that, really excited for X as well and how they could be potential to entry point and, ultimately a source of users for everyone in the ecosystem. Those are just two right off the bat. Happy to talk more about specifics, but, just a couple that I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'll give you three, two of which you mentioned, one that you probably didn't, or one that you didn't. I think the greatest branding, call it what you want, I was going to say PSYOP, I don't think that's the right word. USDC, US dollar coin. I mean, you've got to fuck that up. You've got to intentionally mess that up, because the branding on US dollar coin, I mean, the trust around that positioning and that ticker and that framing is just like, if stable coins are going to win, US dollar coin will win. And you've got to intentionally blow that one up. I think Robinhood's a real dark horse here. The Coinbase product's not as good as it should be. And I say this as an avid holder and lover of Coinbase and what they've done for the space. But the Robinhood product team, I mean, Brandon, you've probably assessed this, is incredible. I mean, probably one of the best fintech product teams of all time. I mean, it is so robust and deep. And I can tell you this is a serious Robinhood power user. They capture every part of my financial life. And if they want to go on chain and then they want to do it right, they're going to be a seriously big player here. And then one that might be interesting that you didn't mention, but they're running the right playbook, is World Liberty Financial. I know people haven't seen the product. The anchor style thesis, not built on 20% yields, with the whole Luna backing, that had real PMF and it worked. And actually, I'm curious, Brandon, you could maybe give us some insights here, specifically around, I think, the EVM ecosystem. I think World Liberty, and then, frankly, Brandon, I'd put you guys up here. I would love to buy some Phantom secondary if anybody wants to sell, because
We'll broker an OTC deal right here, right
yeah,
now.
if anyone wants to sell some Phantom OTC, I'd buy it, because I do think these middle layers have all the upside to capture, right? And so I'll bring up, honestly, I have to bring up Phantom because Phantom's earned its stripe even before I bring that up, which is you own the user behavior and you can capture. The problem with the beauty with middle layers like Phantom, and I describe it as middle layers because it's kind of between the consumer and the chain, is like you leak none of the value. You can capture all of the value, right? And so, at any point in time, depending on how risk adverse Brandon and team decide to be, they could launch any of any net new profitable, extremely groundbreaking business that comes out of crypto. If they wanted to, they could fork, plug it into their distribution, and capture all of that value, right? Like a perfect example of this is if Phantom launched a token launcher, not saying they would own that entire market, in my opinion, right? Or they would be a serious contender, right? And so the beauty is like, again, going to what we said earlier, we're like, where's the value going to accrue? It's going to accrue to the guys making the money, and owning the user interface is where all the money is going to be made. Even on the abstract side, so we have a blockchain, our whole focus is owning the consumer interface. I don't even care about anything else, because the blockchain business is a bad business. The middle layer business is the business. And so World Liberty is interesting, and I'm sure Phantom and you guys have thought about this, specifically around the USD1 implementation, right? Because if you own the interface, right, what is proven to be, what are the three most profitable businesses in crypto? Stablecoin yields at once it hits escape velocity, trading, and token launching. I mean, on paper, and stablecoin yields would maybe bake that into DeFi, right? Brandon already has one, the trading, right? So I can trade directly on Phantom, and it's probably an amazing business line for them. We won't get into that, but I do really like World Liberty's approach. I thought it was really ingenious. USD1 was super ingenious, I thought, and just owning a consumer layer that feels like a bank. I've kind of a little peek under the hood there in terms of what they're doing. That with the stable coins, I'd actually be interested into, Brandon, if you guys have explored stable coins. I can take this thing on a tangent. So Laura, feel free to step in and control this conversation, because I can take this many different ways. But the middle layer is going to be the most profitable, important business layer in crypto. Phantom has shown unbelievable competency from the product side, best in class product, and if and when they decide to go public and they want to make revenue, they can make endless amounts of revenue. I saw that I'm curious if you guys make money on the perps, on the hype implementation. I think you do, right? It's just so smart. So owning the middle layer is going to be the best business in crypto and where all the money is going to be made. And that's why, Brandon, I'm ready for a secondary check at any moment in time for you or any of your employees, brother.
Well, yeah. Well, Luca, thank you so much for gassing me up like that on the podcast. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, you make a lot of good points that I think I'll underscore. I think, yeah, owning the end user is the most important and most strategic place to be in not only the crypto industry, but it's actually it's an internet thing. It's an internet-based phenomenon. And I'm not sure if either of you or anyone in the audience is familiar with Ben Thompson's aggregation theory, where I think pre-internet, sort of the value chain looked a lot different. I think that it was not the distributors, but it was the suppliers that would make a large amount of revenue and capture a lot of value. Think like retailers or newspapers or like TV channels and music labels and things like that. And then once the internet really brought an open and permissionless communication layer to the world, it sort of created this power dynamic where now distribution, it's much easier to create supply and the infrastructure's there. And what really matters is actually owning that distribution point and being that place where the experience is aggregated to the end user. I think Phantom has a very similar structure in that there's a crypto blockchains, which is open permissionless ways to create and store and transfer value on the internet. And they have this same open permissionless structure that allows any developer on the world to deploy something new, try a new experiment, etc. And yeah, the distribution points are really going to be folks who like wallets and other user-facing applications that are actually helping users explore and use those things in a safe and easy to use way, and actually earning their trust over time. And yeah, that does allow us to launch different types of business lines, trading, perps, which has definitely been a huge one for us lately. And then yes, like Luca mentioned, definitely other potential lines that we're thinking about, including stable coins, payments, like I mentioned. Yeah,
Who's your
I
biggest
think
threat, Brandon? Who do you wake up every? Who do you think is your? I could give you my answer if you care for it. But who's your biggest threat? You think?
yeah. Well, I think personally, it's you've mentioned them already. I think Robinhood is their product team is extremely cracked. They've been at it for a while, and just from a pure resources, and they're a huge public company with billions of dollars and thousands of people. So I'd be lying if I'd say, hey, that's not those are who keep me up at night and who I consider to be our primary competitors. There's Coinbase as well, but I'd say Coinbase and Robinhood are very different companies, and that Robinhood, we're much more similar to Robinhood in that we're a product led company. Coinbase is, in my eyes, more of a financial services company, or sort of like trying to become a bank, like the JP Morgan of crypto, which that's great. That's something that we all need as an ecosystem and participants in the ecosystem. But uh, you know, banks are different. JP Morgan's not the same thing as Robinhood, and although they are both very large players and they compete on the fringes, I think their core competencies and core user base are quite different. And so, and I find that Robinhood generally, I think, aligns a little bit more with kind of the direction that we're going. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I feel like, in terms of kind of the strengths and weaknesses of the different players, I think you're right that like Coinbase, they kind of have their bases covered. Oh, wow. I just made a pun and I did not intend to. But, it's kind of like no matter how the competition plays out, they're going to benefit in some way. The question is just, will they be a leader in any one of these areas? They're doing all the things. And I feel like, the base app is their first attempt at creating a strong retail product. And, I think Jesse Pollock is amazing. Clearly, like, when you saw the day that they made their announcement, like, he's just very, you can tell he's a believer in what he does. He's just very enthusiastic. He's very smart. And obviously I haven't played around with the new version of the app, but like, I know that he can be scrappy and like, pivot or, whatever. And he has a lot of ideas. So in that sense, like, I feel like if you're going to kind of have a different type of product come out of Coinbase, like I could see, Jesse doing a good job of leading that. But I agree with you that like something like a Robinhood or X, they're both like very sticky for users, and so that is just a strong point for either of them. But okay, so in a moment, we're going to get to kind of all the different specific areas. But first, we have an announcement here at Unchained, which is that our crypto and macro show, Bits and Bips, now has its own feeds. So we're spinning it off from the Unchained feed. We're moving to a new podcast and a YouTube channel. It also has its own X account. So if you want to keep up with the weekly live streams and get your macro meets crypto breakdown, be sure to subscribe to the Bits and Bips channel on X, YouTube, any podcast platform. And you can find all of them linked at unchainedcrypto.com/bits and bips. And then the other thing is we have another announcement, which is that we are doing our audience survey and we've got a great perk for you. Our sponsor, Falcon X, is giving Unchained listeners 4 free weeks of Focal, their AI-powered assistant for crypto traders. Normally, new users get a 2-week trial, but if you take our survey, you will get double the access, 4 weeks for free. Focal was built for institutions. Now it's available to serious traders like you. It helps you track price action, token unlocks, news, and open interest all in one place, so you can move faster in 24/7 markets. And as a bonus, survey respondents will also be entered to win a free 1-year subscription to our brand new newsletter, Bits and Bips. So you can go to unchainedcrypto.com/survey to fill it out and get your 4 free weeks of Focal. Again, that's unchainedcrypto.com/survey. Traditional stablecoin yield often comes with hidden risks or long lockups that limit your flexibility. RE changes that with 2 transparent, regulated options that earn both yield and points. RE-USD offers up to 8% APY backed by ETH basis strategies or treasury bills, perfect for treasuries and market makers who need liquidity without underwriting risk. For higher yield seekers, RE-USDE provides up to 16% APY, backed by fully collateralized U.S. insurance programs, including homeowners, auto insurance policies, compensation, and more. All assets are transparently reported on-chain and written against regulated counterparties for maximum security. Whether you're managing a DAO treasury or seeking uncorrelated yield opportunities, RE delivers stable returns plus points without the volatility. Start earning today at re.xyz, re.xyz. Mantle leads the establishment of blockchain for banking as the next frontier. UR is the access layer that transforms Mantle Network into a purpose-built vertical platform, the blockchain for banking, that enables financial services on-chain. UR unifies and vertically aligns Mantle's focus on payments, trading, and assets. MI4, METH protocol, functions FBTC, supported by developer grants, ecosystem incentives, and the industry-leading distribution platform through the UR app, Reward Station, and Bybit launch pool. All economic activity within UR will be captured by Mantle Network to further drive value to token holders and establish its significance in blockchain for banking. Follow Mantle_official to learn more. Okay, back to my conversation with Luca and Brandon. All right, so let's talk about payments. And I'm starting with this because it sort of feels like this whole stablecoin payments thing, this is going to be kind of the next phase of adoption. You know, crypto people, they know how to transact, they have their wallet, you know, whatever, but non-crypto people, they're not, using crypto generally. So, you know, to my mind at this moment, I would say Coinbase with its Shopify deal, Stripe with Tempo, and then any of these stable coin chains that we talked about, Plasma, Stable, etc. To my mind, these are the main players in this area. There are some other ones with PayPal had its own stablecoin, but it hasn't really taken off. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how you think the competition will play out here, like which players you think have, a stronger position versus others, and what are kind of the make or break factors?
Well, yeah, one other dark horse that I'll mention, or not really dark horse, quite the opposite, is USDT as well, and thinking about payments in more of like a broader non-US centric view. So I think I'll add them to the mix as well in this general topic. But yeah, I think payments is super interesting. I think there's 2 types of payments broadly. There's peer-to-peer payments when users are sending dollars to one another, and then there's consumer to merchant payments where a consumer is paying a merchant for or good or service. So I think there's a different, there's, you can kind of break down the topic in those 2 ways. I'll say in general, I think the business to consumer side has been largely an issue of a merchant side acceptance. So the problem is that most merchants don't know how to deal with crypto. They don't know how to manage it, accept it. They just want real US dollars. And so I think in my mind that's sort of the biggest hurdles for payments to really take off is the merchant acceptance piece. And that's why I think generally Stripe is probably my pick, or where I think, the player that I think is going to help push this space the most, is because they have the distribution point into the merchants of the world, right? I think most people, they think about point of sale, like real physical places where you can spend money, but Stripe obviously has a huge position on just the general e-commerce landscape. So that's the merchant side. On the consumer
And
side,
just actually
yeah,
to ask more directly,
yeah.
so you feel like even though Coinbase already has this deal with Shopify, that once Tempo is launched, like the competition is over, or
Well, no, no, definitely not. I mean, I think Tempo also is just it's not even out yet, right? We have no idea, and I think the biggest winners in this space are not really going to be known for a while. So certainly not once something is out, like they're just going to win it or anything like that. But I think in terms of where I think the biggest problems are and how that matches up to the players that are coming in, I think I'm just matching. Hey, biggest problem merchant side acceptance, biggest potential solution provider. I think Stripe. That being said, there obviously is a lot of work to be done on the consumer side experience as well of that equation. I do think Phantom, to Luca's point, is one of the best 0 to 1 entry points into crypto and actually getting stablecoin dollars into users' hands. And so, yeah, I think expect us to be a pretty big player in this space as well over the coming years. But yeah, maybe I think generally it's going to take a while to play out. And yeah, a whole side I haven't really talked about is like peer-to-peer consumer payments, and that's an area that I think
yeah,
has
well,
generally been pretty uncracked.
do you have any thoughts on that, or do you feel like it'll start
No,
more with the B2B type, or sorry, B2C, I guess?
I think in the US it's going to start a little bit more B2C, and people are going to start to see, especially merchants are going to see the benefits of that a lot sooner because of they have a lot more margin to save when by adopting blockchain technologies, right? They give up 3% to card networks. They're not usually not earning yield on the dollars that they receive directly, and so I think combination of stable coins and blockchain networks really moved the needle for them. Whereas in the US, peer-to-peer payments is largely, I think, for if you ask like the normal person off the street, it feels like a largely solved issue. Like people use Venmo and Square Cash and they feel like that's fine. And so whereas in the emerging markets, that infrastructure, TradFi infrastructure is not trusted. TradFi infrastructure is not necessarily there, and then that's why you see USDT adopted a lot more because the value prop is there for them. So anyway, so yeah, I think basically B2C payments is I think where we're going to see the US market really pick up because the value prop for merchants is really there, and has been more of a it's been more of a usability issue for them in terms of like how they've actually been able, like, do they have the tools and everything to be able to tackle these, or like to actually take advantage of of all of the improvements. So yeah, that's just kind of high level thesis, but
Yeah, Laura, I have a question. When you ask that question, like define stablecoin success, because I think there's like there's a couple answers to this, right? Like my answer for who will win the stablecoin race from net new B2C users would be different from, monthly and yearly stablecoin volume would be different from highest revenue generator. So just curious, what would you like? Define the number one metric for stablecoin success. Is it issuance? Is it volume? And I think I can give you an answer on that. And then, yeah, I'll ask that, and then I have another answer that's a little separate, but or statement separate.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking like users and volume, but I agree that there should be two buckets, as Brandon pointed out. But my personal view is it will likely start with things like Stripe, just getting stablecoins into the hands of users, getting them used to using a wallet, that sort of thing. But eventually, yeah, I do think people will be paying each other in stablecoins. So sort of like a two-phase rollout. So maybe if you want to answer for both phases.
Yeah, so I think the answer depends, and I think they'll do this because it's more advantageous for them to do this. If Stripe flips a switch and everything runs through like $1 and then auto converts to a stable coin, it's going to really be hard to beat that just naturally on volume because they can convert all their volume into stablecoin volume. Again, that's more of like an engineering question, but from a feasibility perspective, right? If they're getting yield and all the perks that come from that, Stripe would be very hard to beat there. I actually think, and Phantom might be working in this direction, but I actually think there's a Zelle Cash App style product, which kind of I got the vibe of when you guys issued usernames, in terms of like net new adoption on like a new behavioral pattern. I think it's either going to be an incumbent like Phantom, or it's going to be a new startup, and we've yet to see them. So I'm very like, I think there's actually an arbitrage opportunity where you take all of the fintech incumbents, consumer fintech incumbents, and you just replicate the exact business on stablecoin blockchain rails. And I think there's something super competitive there because the app literally just becomes borderless. And I don't believe in these multi-billion-dollar incumbents' ability to pivot, which goes into my next statement, which is like, what a fumble by PayPal, because they were so ahead of the curve. They saw it coming. They saw it and they were first. And all these stablecoin companies, you saw Circle's big IPO run up, and I was trading PayPal. I was like, somebody's got to tell some story here, because but it's just so to that point, which is why I said it's either going to take a team like Brandon's or a net new team to come in and take, but I definitely would imagine that this is somewhere in Phantom's roadmap, which is like, where, what is PayPal's, look at PayPal's business, look at Square's business, look at Zelle's business. And if you really just put that business on blockchain rails, right, and those usernames and those numbers, become tied to wallets, and the on and off ramping is incredible. I mean, it is $100 billion business opportunity, right? I mean, you can already see the market caps of whatever those guys are, because those are really like, a lot of those guys have a majority of market share in the United States. I mean, you're then opening that market share to the entire planet, anyone with an internet connection. And that's why I'm so desperate for Phantom Secondary, because or anybody who's building this in this spirit, because this is going to be the great unlock. But it's going to take a product first, young, hungry team who doesn't have, who isn't comfortable with tons of infra that they have to go and redo. And that's why I don't believe the incumbents are going to be able to pivot. I don't think Square is going to be able to pivot. You would think somebody like PayPal would be able to pivot. That just showed me, PayPal's lack of market share here shows me that what I'm saying is true. And Zelle is just not going to pivot. And there's not tech forward, they're not product forward. But this consumer product where everybody has a username, and this username is permissionless from me to China to Africa to anywhere on the planet. Just give me an internet connection. I can send you some dollars and you can put it into your bank account seamlessly, easily, with great on and off ramping. The hard part in that product is really the banking, right? Banking all of those different countries. That's where, I have some ideas, because I've thought about this idea before incubating this product, but too much of a distraction off of our core focus. But the banking is the off ramping is really the hard part there. But that's how integrating with with certain partners in those regions could solve that issue. That is a ginormous business, and a business that is going to change how people just transact in the world, period. And I think will be the most valuable stablecoin business, especially if you compare that with your own stablecoin. Like, that to me is the creme de la creme. But then again, like I said, Stripe can turn on a switch and process all their volume through their native stablecoin on their chain, and you won't be able to beat that tidal wave, but a tidal wave can be beat by a multitude of miniature waves over the course of time. And so I'm most excited about that type of startup in the stablecoin space, is who's going to disrupt PayPal, Zelle, and Cash App, and do that on a universal global scale, because that is the golden North Star, I think, for stablecoins. It's less about, like, and I wouldn't say less about, but I'm not that excited about, I can pay for my t-shirts on Shopify and stablecoins. Like, I get that, and that works, and that performs the function of volume and revenue. I'm more excited about, like, the true breakthrough around crypto and blockchain. Like, the thing that sold me in 2017 And I wish I was wiser then, but I was sold on the fact that blockchains enable the basic human right of being able to send money to somebody without somebody in the middle, right? And so there's a lot of different businesses that have disrupted and have enabled basic human rights, right? The basic human right to communicate with somebody. What is that? That's social networks, right? The basic human right to, transact is stable coins and payment rails. And this is where I think, the Phantoms of the world or some net new startup is who's going to be the company that owns the basic human right to transact freely with somebody from point A to point B at any place in the world. That is a multi-$100 billion business, but that is going to be built by somebody who's like less about the minutia of volume and more about the mission and the function of that mission of getting there than they are like, buying buying some cup on Shopify, right? Like I'm more interested on like, I got a friend in Africa I want to send some money to and I can send it to him in 1 second. And and Phantom already performs that function, in a retrospect, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny what you said about how there must be a story at PayPal because I don't know if you saw Jose De Ponte, who used to head up their crypto efforts, left recently, went to Stellar. And when I look at DeFi Llama, I see PYUSD is 10th on the list of stablecoins in terms of market cap at 1.2 billion. So
I'm ready to do a deal with PayPal. I've been asking, so maybe we can come in and help their stablecoin effort.
So one thing, and I know, like, you said for you, the Stripe thing wasn't so interesting. No, actually, before I asked that, while you were talking, I was thinking about the Solana Seeker because I was like, okay, that's actually really interesting. Here you have hardware, and this new version has it's basically like a hardware wallet, but it's your phone, and it's like it uses biometrics and all this stuff. And I wondered, like, do you think that is like a way that suddenly now we could have like a different type of entrant, like a totally, coming in from this, what's that word, or orthogonal manner?
I do. I think the problem with that at scale is for hardware products to work, or any product to work, hardware or software, it has to be a better product, or at least has to be some semblance of a better product. You have to be close. The problem with a phone is you're never going to beat the incumbents. You're going to have to be a real superstar talent. And so I think Solana Seeker has amazing implications in a more holistic fashion than I think the fashion that maybe we're describing, because I think Brandon will be able to beat, like if they were going heads up on stablecoins payments, there's no chance Seeker is going to compete with Phantom. Phantom is just, it's too much of an extra step in the conversion process, but it's for a different use case. Like I do think hardware plays a role, and I do think there is products around hardware, and I think Solana Seeker can be incredibly successful. But like, why didn't PayPal create hardware? Any of these guys create hardware? I think it's for good reason. I think they've underwritten and understood why. But Solana Seeker, I like better as an ecosystem product, right, to perform a multitude of different functions versus the conversation we're having now, which is like stablecoins perform one function, get dollars from point A to point B. And that is going to be a masterclass in software. And, Brandon so far is honestly, frankly, leading the charge there. But I do think Solana Seeker in a holistic crypto, hardware product, like there's multiple implications that from a chain perspective, it's actually a very bright direction, I think, for Solana. Because like my whole ethos is I think chains are going to have to do one thing, is they're going to have to own the consumer interface. And owning the consumer interface through a hardware product is actually a place like most of us aren't even thinking about. And so it's a really big swing down a very ambitious direction that I support. And there's a lot of implications to that product that make the crypto experience better. But for the sake of the stablecoin conversation, it doesn't move the needle, in my opinion.
Yeah. By the way, Brandon, I didn't know I invited your number one fan.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Luca. Well, generally I agree with everything Luca said. I mean, especially the parts where he mentioned Phantom is leading the charge. For Seeker specifically, hardware is it's vastly different from software, obviously, in that there's huge economies of scale involved, and you know, it just it doesn't really seem plausible to me that Seeker competing with iPhone is really like playing a game to win. I think Seekers they're playing a little bit of a different game and Solana is very good is very well positioned to do something like this, where they're very well capitalized and they can paint visions for people to actually push the industry forward. And so I think, the Seeker is a really good example of what can be built on crypto rails, but in my opinion, not necessarily going to really have a huge chance at competing with Apple and Android directly. But that being said, I think the crypto space is due for a hardware wallet shakeup. I think it's been a while since everyone just sort of kind of accepted the ledger as sort of the main hardware player, and so really excited about what Seeker is going to do specifically there. But maybe unwinding conversation 2 notches and just going back to this sort of like global peer-to-peer payments super app that takes advantage of stable coins to really enable global interactions and payments. Yeah, huge fumble by PayPal and incumbents there. I think, like we talked about structurally, it's really hard for these huge public companies to get on any kind of bleeding edge curve, but B, I think specifically in crypto, I think all of them it's hard for them to really innovate without feeling like they may be killing their golden goose in some way, and I don't blame them. They have a lot more to lose than upstart players, and so I think just structurally you're going to see bigger players not really be able to effectively enter the space. And then I guess going all the way on the other end of the spectrum, though, I will say companies that are coming. There have been a lot of attempts at like crypto Venmo or crypto Square Cash throughout the history of crypto, and I think the biggest problem that those apps face is the cold start problem, where payments is a social thing. You're paying from point A to point B, and both people need to be on that app, right? Starting from zero is a very difficult place to be, and especially if you're just like, hey, we're coming out, we're competing directly with Venmo. Why would I use this other app if all my friends and everyone in my family and everyone I'm already paying is on Venmo? It's a very hard proposition. That's why I think that you will see a player enter this space who has an existing large user distribution, existing relationships with end consumers that already have that large captive audience, and then are kind of layering different businesses and applications on top. Obviously that's the position that we're in, position that folks like Robinhood and others are in as well. So I think that's sort of the dynamic that's, I think, hurting the very bottom of like the net new folks.
Yeah, I feel like in a way, crypto almost solves the cold start problem in the sense that as long as you have like chains that are compatible, if multiple different wallet providers all take USDC on Ethereum, or Tether on Tron, or whatever, then that like helps a little bit. But last thing, just on the stablecoin piece, is I wondered if you had any thoughts on how Stripe's acquisitions of like Privy or Bridge would help them, or like how that might shape how the adoption happens in the stablecoin space.
Yeah, Bridge is sort of an obvious one. They can't. They have to be able to issue stable coins, and it's Bridge allows them to really. Well, I guess there's a couple different aspects of Bridge. There's sort of the issuance business, and then there's like stablecoin orchestration. Without Bridge, they're not really be able to. They would have to start from zero in terms of like being able to build all those capabilities, and instead they're just accelerating their roadmap by buying like a extremely cracked and performant team. And so that obviously just really adds a lot of fuel to the fire in terms of issuing stable coins, being able to move stable coins from point A to B, being able to connect to all these bank accounts, etc. So that's huge. And then Privy is also an interesting one. I think that it's unclear exactly how they're going to fit into the whole Stripe stack. But one very natural place is in this merchant acceptance example that I gave earlier. It's like merchants, they don't want to accept crypto from end users because they don't know how to store it, they don't know how to manage it, etc. Now, with Privy and having that sort of wallet technology in-house or Stripe, it makes that side of the equation a lot easier. And so, I forget what the initial question is, but those are definitely core infrastructure pieces that Stripe has acquired that is definitely going to allow them to move faster. So yeah, super excited about both of those.
Okay, Luca, do you want to add anything there?
Nothing to that. I mean, I think Brandon's best to answer that question, but I did have a thought that I just want to share.
Oh,
as I'm on my fanboy spree. Brandon, you want to know when you made it? And I think this is probably like a tag team between your CMO and head of partnerships. The big swing for you is getting Phantom pre-installed on phones. That's the big swing. That's the really big swing. That's the deal. You got to have somebody doing that full time. Get me pre-installed on phones. You don't need to go Android because Android's your most likely bet here. This was like the great YouTube breakthrough. You're going to have to go to some smaller phones first, but that's the big one because, the real technical guys will hate me for this statement, so I probably won't even say it. But, Phantom pre-installed on some phones is maybe half of the Solana Seeker vision, probably, right? And there's another half that obviously you got to give credit for. But pre-installations, Phantom pre-installed, especially on the third world phone companies, the ones in Africa and places like that. Woo! That's a big one, dude. You got to have one guy on that full time.
So it wasn't pre-installed, but it was like featured when I opened up my Seeker. It was like very prominently featured. I can't remember exactly. I probably have screenshots of it on my Seeker. But I remember that it was like one of the first things that I downloaded because it was like, download this, basically. But anyway, okay, let's move on to talking about trading. I know you guys will be excited to talk about this because it features Robinhood, obviously. This is obviously another area of crypto adoption. This is one of the big pieces that has actually fueled crypto for a long time. And here we have two big players, Robinhood and Coinbase, that are bringing perpetuals and just like getting more into derivatives. We have all this action with these tokenized stocks or tokenized equity. And I wondered kind of when you look at the various things that are going on and, obviously like some of, so Robinhood, was going to do the tokenized equity on the Robinhood chain. But then we also had, like Kraken doing the X stocks thing that was on Solana. And so I just wondered kind of like amongst all these different, forays that we're seeing by these different companies into this world, like who you think is best positioned and, which products you think will take off and which you think are maybe not structured in a good way or their go-to-market isn't strong.
Well, yeah, definitely pretty broad topic and a lot of different directions to go in. I think generally, you are seeing, I think trading as an activity is morphing throughout generations, right? I think prior to our generation, maybe our parents' generation, trading was a very, very, buttoned up financial activity that you would do at an institution, and not something that would be done casually or be done for entertainment value, for example. Now, with I think the younger generations, especially, you're seeing more of a sort of hyper financialization of entertainment, attention, etc., where trading in different types of sort of risk on activities like sports betting and things like that are becoming a lot more accessible, becoming a lot more mainstream. And so I think generally you'll see, I mean, the definition of trading and the use cases are just becoming a lot more different and a lot more, in my mind, a lot more akin to entertainment or some attention seeking, activity. And so, yeah, I think in terms of who's best set up for that, I think it's whoever has the hearts and minds and trust of the younger generation, and where those folks are, storing their dollars and going towards. And so yeah, obviously Robinhood is, I think, in that spot currently, at least in the US. But I think at the same time, another trend that we all subscribe to here is that all financial activity is moving on chain, right? And so I think you'll see the true winner being not only the folks who can appeal to the next generation, but who are also effectively navigating what's going on in the on-chain environment. And yeah, props to Robinhood being very forward there, launching their own chain and launching tokenized stocks and whatnot. And I'm glad they're pushing forward there. Whoever is mastering sort of what's the trends that are actually emerging on chain in an on chain first way, and crossing that perfectly with sort of the new age attention, is probably going to be the biggest winner in this general trend. But of course, there's a lot of different subsections in that.
I like Brandon's answer.
Well, I mean, so you talked before about how you're such a big fanboy of Robinhood. So like, do you feel that Coinbase, like if you were Coinbase, what would you try to do to take on Robinhood in the trading arena?
It's the products are so different. And Coinbase has been known not to be a product team, right? Like you've almost just seen like the last couple of big swings they took at bat, they missed. All right, the NFT marketplace, a couple other things. And just like the product is just not comparable. I think Brandon is right. They should lean into, and I didn't even look at that framing. I'm actually bullish Coinbase after that framing, Brandon, which is like they should be the JP Morgan. That's what they should do. Like they should go all in there. Because I think like product is a DNA thing. You can't just, it's very hard to go plug in like a SEAL Team 6, and like very few people know how to do that. That starts from the top down, right? Coinbase is a deal maker. They're leverage. They have all the leverage. They know how to do deals. They have great brand rapport, great cachet, first to market. Just go be JP Morgan. I think that was a really good framing. That makes me bullish.
So you feel like they should give up on what Brian Armstrong, the CEO, always talks about, which is like bringing people on chain. Like what you're talking about is they should just stick with the centralized model and not try to push more decentralization.
I think they should M&A those. Like they're in the business of, if they want to be innovative, like buy the groups who are innovative that are building those solutions that they want. Like it just doesn't come across to me, and I've been a Coinbase user since 2016. Like it doesn't come across to me like every product has been better. Like why did FTX even win? Because they like basically built a good product that was available in the States, and people could finally trade in a sophisticated fashion. Like Coinbase, FTX should have never gained any market share, right? Coinbase should have had that moat. So just like I would in a perfect world, like totally, yeah, go do the vision and the direction is right. I just don't think that team is built for that. If you just look at like the case studies, and like that's just my third party assessment looking in, like they just don't look like they're like, again, a product team seems like a DNA thing, right? Something that starts from the top down. The top guy has to be a product guy. I don't know if Brian is today. Seems like he's a deal maker guy, a good decision maker guy, a guy who makes the right decisions, things like that. I don't know. And because you just look at Robinhood and I'm like, the product is incredible. The same functions I try to perform, on Coinbase, I get notifications and blocks, and I have to go through approvals and verifications. And I do the same function on Robinhood, who just opened up crypto deposits a year ago. And it's a whole, no issues, face scanning, pass keys, the whole nine is just better. I think being a part of being a good entrepreneur is sitting and living in your truth, right? Like understanding what you're good and what you're not good at. And usually if you're not a good product guy, you have to go buy product guys, right? Who are building the product that you want to build, or you just sit in your truth and realize you're not a product guy and you just go do what you are good at, which in my mind, like the USDC Coinbase deal is a perfect example of what Coinbase is good at. Deal making, right? Having the moat of the being the most established and credible, arm in the US in crypto and levering that to go and do great deals that accrue value to shareholders. I just don't think it's not like Brandon and team, I think in a war room, and just so you know, I think Jesse's top 3 builders in crypto. I think Jesse's phenomenal. And if anyone can pull it off, it's probably him. But you need one building product that doesn't come from one guy. It's a unit. It's like I found this. I got really blessed with my unit. I didn't know it at the time until a couple of years after looking back. Sometimes you just get lucky and you get the right people together. But I don't think one man can brute force product, especially when you're building Base, which is an ecosystem, right? Like there's so many other layers to Base that is not the app. The app is a layer and probably the vocal and nucleus layer, but to think that he can solely focus on building product every day isn't important. I'd be remiss. So yeah, I mean, Robinhood is clearly a product first team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very, gamified and all that. Okay. Before we wrap, we'll just tackle the last topic, which is, we have like these attempts at this everything app. Like obviously Base is probably the first one. They've said that they want to head there. And they did this partnership with Polymarket. They have another one with Kalshi. Who knows how they're going to do the rest of it. But I was just curious for your thoughts on like who you think would be best positioned here, or what types of characteristics any players in this space would need in order to succeed.
Yeah. Well, the everything app thesis, generally, I think I don't necessarily agree with trying to compete for the everything app. I mean, I think basically if you're going to compete there and win there, you need to be an established, humongous player with humongous distribution. So, X, potentially, Facebook, potentially, those types of players with that kind of humongous order of magnitude reach. Otherwise, if you're trying to compete and by definition in everything, is just a losing proposition. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just literally setting yourself up to fail unless you have that God tier resources at your fingertips. And so I think it's got to be folks who have those hundreds of millions to billions of existing users, and are built on top of rails, that allow them like true global reach and interactions. And so
you don't feel like the Base app can bootstrap this? Like they're already coming out of the gate not going to be able to compete against something like X or any other existing social network?
I mean, I think Base app is going to be the next everything app. No, absolutely not. Like it's just humongous. It's just when you're an entrepreneur and you're an underdog, you basically have to pick and choose your battles, and you have to know, like what Luca was saying, like be in the truth of and embrace what you're good at and what you're not. And I think the proposition of just competing everywhere at the same time is just doesn't make sense. And so, yeah, I think that's why it's been so hard for in the West, to have those true super apps. I think iOS and the App Store is probably closest to the true super app of the West.
Wait, the whole operating system?
Yeah, I would say so. Oh. In terms of it actually, yeah, the whole iPhone, App Store, iOS. I think that is the closest to like true super app that we have. And I mean, and what is the definition of an app? Really, it's I think in the end, it's about owning the relationship with the end user, and Apple owns all those relationships, and that's why they have extreme pricing power on the App Store and things like Apple Pay, etc. And in the East, it's just a little bit of a different setup, and you have pseudo state sponsored companies and things like that, and so that gives those folks a lot of like unfair distribution power, whereas in the West, yeah, I think you're going to have to be one of those humongous players, whether it's a Google, Facebook, etc. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Luca, what about you?
I kind of said this with blockchains, and I think it's applicable, which is like this general purpose, we're going to do everything approach, like, let's just go back to first principles here as what it means to be a successful entrepreneur. Like, doing everything well at once is an impossible feat. And it's one that is like destined for failure. And like, you can get lucky and, you know, maybe like a dart hits and it works, but just this idea of like doing every single thing well, I think is like a poor approach. So I believe in central destinations I believe in central middle layers to do everything on chain. I don't believe in the everything app. Like, I think there should be, like, I think Phantom does this well. You know, I think we took inspiration on the Portal product. You know, World App also, I think, is thinking through this lens. I think there should be places to perform on-chain functions. I just think sometimes when you're thinking about like crypto everything app, I think guys are trying to go do social and do like hundreds of different things. And I think that can get really convoluted really quick, really fast. So I believe there'll be iterations of it, but I think you need to find killer PMF in one vertical first, and then you scale the features out accordingly versus like coming out of the gates with these, you know, everything apps, you know, without people, like without one feature working or sticking. I think is probably how I would look at it through that lens.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, they're still in beta, so it's pretty close right now and very few people are using it. You guys, this was super fun. Thank you so much for coming on Unchained.
Thanks for having us.
So much, Laura.
Unchained is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Matt Pilchard, Juan Uranovich, Pam Majumdar, and Mark Akuria. Thanks for listening.